Landlords in one city are suing after the city forced them to pass out voter registration information to their tenants. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over the landlords in one city in Michigan that are suing over this law that the city passed that basically requires landlords to pass out voter registration information to their tenants. Now, obviously, I don't like any additional things that they try to force landlords to do. And it's not the job of a landlord to make sure that all voters are registered. It's the responsibility of each individual to, if they get registered, that's on them. That's not on the landlord. And one of the biggest problems I have with these sort of laws is there are penalties if landlords don't follow the law. So, of course, the landlords, they had every right to sue because this sort of thing, it's not constitutional. And I know it's not constitutional because a federal judge actually found that it wasn't constitutional up in the Twin Cities in Minnesota in a very, very similar lawsuit. And I'm going to be talking about both of these stories here in just a moment. So before I get into the articles, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. In your city, do they have any sort of requirements that make landlords pass out voter registration information to tenants? Now, the argument I believe that landlords used before was that this is compelling speech. They're forcing landlords to, get these people registered as compelling speech, and therefore it's unconstitutional. Now, I'm not a constitutional law attorney, but it does seem that way to me. Okay. So, I'm going to be going over a few more details, more specifics about exactly this sort of thing. And maybe if there are these sort of laws in the city where you invest or where you live, you would have a few more tools in order to fight them. Okay. So, anyway, let's get into this first article. This article is coming from MichiganLive.com, and it says Ypsilanti landlords sue city over rule they must give voting information to tenants. And, you know, it reeks of all the stuff that was going on during 2020 where they're like, oh, everybody needs an absentee ballot. And then they're doing voter drives and all this, trying to swing the election one way or another, right? And I don't like that sort of thing. To me, if you have the right to vote, the eligibility to vote, etc., right, then it is on you. It is incumbent upon you to make sure that you are registered and that you vote during the election. It is not the responsibility of the landlord. And if the government wants to make sure more people are registered, they should do that themselves. They shouldn't be pushing it on to private business. I mean, what's next? Are they going to go down to the grocery store and say, hey, grocery store, you have to register all your customers to vote? No, they don't do that to anyone but landlords. And I find it absolutely ridiculous. The smartest thing would be to offer the voter registration information when people renew their driver's licenses. That's what they do here and in all the states I've ever lived in, right? And that way, if like for example, a tenant moves into a new house or apartment that they're renting, they're supposed to get a new driver's license or an updated driver's license, and they can just register to vote right there. No issues with trying to force the landlord to do it or none of that nonsense. So anyway, let's get into this article. With the aid of a conservative legal group, 5 Ypsilanti landlords are suing the city over a requirement they must provide voter information to tenants. The lawsuit, seeking a declaration the rules are unconstitutional, claims the landlords can't be forced to deliver new tenants a city information packet, including polling locations, absentee ballot procedures, and a voter registration form, a requirement on the books since city leaders passed the 2018 ordinance. It is compelled speech to engage landlords to act as couriers of the municipality's ideological messages to prospective tenants. Registering to vote is irrelevant to a tenant's decision to enter into a lease agreement with a landlord, reads the complaint, filed May 11th in federal court, and alleging violations of the landlord's First Amendment speech rights. And I have to agree, okay? Now, regardless of whether it's beneficial or not to society to have a large number of voters, the important thing is, who are you forcing to pass out this information? And why are there penalties for the landlord for not doing it? Okay. So you're going down to private property owners, private business owners, and telling them, it's your job to make sure that all these people are registered. No, it's not. That's not my job. That has nothing to do with renting a house. That has absolutely nothing to do with renting a house. The only thing the city is doing is being lazy and not doing their job as the government, okay? It is your job to make sure that people have a way to get registered to vote, not the landlords. I don't need to be passing out information packets. So now I got to go down to City Hall and pick up a whole bunch of information packets for all my tenants. Now I got to make sure that each tenant gets their voter registration information. That's not my job. Okay, I'm running a landlord business here. I don't have time to make sure that everybody's registered to vote. That's stupid, okay? Goodness. Like I said, they would never put this sort of thing onto any other private business, but this is just them being lazy bureaucrats, and then they're going to sit there and they're probably going to fine landlords for not doing it. So, yeah, they need to be sued. And then they throw out there, oh, it was a conservative legal group, and you know how they're just, no. It is people who care about, one, their property rights, their rights as individuals, their constitutional rights, and making sure that the government is the one who does their job, and that private parties should not be forced to do the government's job for them. So yeah, like I said, if they want to pass out an information packet, they need to do that, not the landlords. Backing the legal challenge are attorneys with the Chicago-based Thomas More Society, a nonprofit law firm that has distinguished itself with work on behalf of anti-abortion causes and on religious liberty issues. The landlords who brought the case, Ian Greenlee, Stuart Beal, Karen Maurer, C. Hedger Breed, and Robert Barnes, include major city property owners and managers. Ypsilanti City Code states, unbelievably, that landlords who fail to provide copies of voter registration information to their tenants are subject to a municipal civil infraction. It's outrageous and it's unconstitutional, said Eric Cardall, Thomas More Society special counsel, in a statement. Yeah, so you can get a city infraction. So what does that really mean? That means that if a landlord doesn't do this, right, and they get fined from the city and they don't pay that fine, well, guess what? They can be thrown in jail. That's how ridiculous all this is for not passing out the city's voter registration information. So, you know what I say? I say that, yeah, they deserve to be sued. This needs to be thrown out. And the whole reason it needs to be thrown out is because these laws have already been proven to be unconstitutional in other states. And that's going to bring me over to the second article that I have for you today, right? And this article is coming from the StarTribune.com, and it says, Judge strikes down Minneapolis St. Paul rules requiring landlords to provide info on voting. And very, very similar law in Minneapolis and St. Paul up in the Twin Cities, right? And it was thrown out by a federal judge because it's just not legal. So let's read the details right now. Minneapolis and St. Paul cannot force landlords to give new tenants city-approved documents instructing them how to register to vote, a federal judge ruled Monday. U.S. District Judge Wilhelmina Wright ruled that the requirements, passed as a part of an effort to boost voter registration, violate the landlord's First Amendment rights because they compel them to convey the city's messages. Minneapolis enacted an ordinance in 2016 requiring landlords to provide voter registration information in a manner approved by the city to tenants who are 18 or older as a condition for keeping their rental licenses. So yeah, they said they would strip the landlord of their rental license, put them out of business if they didn't provide voter registration information for the city. You know how ridiculous that is right there? Of course it was unconstitutional, just like this law in Michigan is unconstitutional as well. Now, this article, it was written in 2020, so that was when this law up in the Twin Cities got tossed out. March 3rd of 2020. It looks like it happened right before the pandemic started, fortunately. So, I'm optimistic that the law in Ypsilanti, Michigan also will be tossed out. It says here, 2 years later, the city of St. Paul passed a similar measure requiring landlords to give tenants who are old enough to vote registration information identified by the city clerk. Both cities said they hoped the requirements would help reduce disparities in voter turnout, noting that homeowners tend to vote at a higher rate than renters. And that will always be the case, okay? A lot of renters, they are more transient and they care less about the neighborhoods that they live in or the places that they live in. And not to mention they're lower income, and people who are lower income vote at a much lower rate in general. Okay, so homeowners, they have this connection to the community. They own a property there. They want the community to be nice, and they vote at higher rates because of that. Now, that doesn't mean that renters don't vote at all, but trying to get more renters to vote by forcing landlords to pass out pamphlets and making sure their tenants are registered, that's just, it's unconstitutional. And that's what this federal judge found. So, in my opinion, right, this law in Ypsilanti, Michigan is doomed. Okay, it's going. It's gone. And I believe that the lawsuit in Minneapolis, St. Paul that got their law struck down. I hope that it is the basis for rules across the entire country that force this sort of stuff on the landlords to be just tossed.